Answer me when I call to you, my righteous God. Give me relief from my distress.
By the rivers of
Have mercy
Babylon we
on me
sat
and
and
hear my
wept
prayer.
when we remembered Zion.
Why, Lord, do you
Have
stand
mercy
far off?
on me, Lord,
Why do you
for I
hide
am
yourself?
faint.
Be merciful to
Trouble.
me,
Heal me,
Lord,
Answer me when I
for
call
my
to
I am
you,
bones
in
are
my
in
distress.
agony.
Joy.
Give
My
me
Turn to
soul
me
is
and
in
be gracious to me, for I am
Mercy
lonely
on
and
me
afflicted.
and hear my prayer.
Awake, Lord.
Why, Lord, do you
Turn,
stand
Lord,
Why do you
far off?
sleep?
for me.
Why
I
do
am
you
overwhelmed with
hide
troubles,
yourself?
and my life draws near to death.
Among the dead, no one
Why do you
compares.
hide your face and forget our misery and oppression?
I am worn out from my
My
groaning.
enemies.
Tear it down, they cried. Tear it down to its foundations.
Rescue us.
My eyes
You are cut off from your care.
They fail because of all my foes.
I am forgotten
lowest
as though I
pit,
were dead.
in the
I am
darkest
worn
depths.
out
I have
from
become
Relieve
like
the
a
troubles
brick
of my
of
heart
pottery.
and free me from my
For I
anguish.
hear many
You
whisper,
have overwhelmed
Have mercy
me
on
with
me
terror
and hear my
your
prayer.
waves.
side.
You have taken from me
They
my
conspire
closest
against me.
friends.
and plot to take my life.
How long, Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long must I wrestle with my thoughts, and day after day have sorrow in my heart? How long will my enemy triumph over me?
This morning we are, as we've heard, looking at the Psalms of Lament. We have looked at the Psalms of Orientation last week, and we're going to be moving on in a couple of weeks to New Orientation. But we can't get there unless we go through disorientation, unless we go through those Psalms, often called the Laments, and these are the Psalms that grieve, the Psalms that mourn, the Psalms that protest to God, sometimes even against God and his very character. These Psalms aren't comfortable reading, and they can be quite painful to listen to. But they are still prayer, and they're real. Eugene Peterson, author of The Message Bible and so many other excellent books, says this: praying isn't being nice before God. The Psalms aren't pretty. They're not nice. Faith often isn't smooth, nice, or pretty, but it's honest. And I think we're trying for honesty in our faith. And I think if we look, we can see that our Western society has become so sanitized, so removed from pain and suffering, that our prayers often just become almost the respectable version of what we really feel. We ask God to move, please, if it's possible. Could he possibly change things? But even if not, then could he just give us the strength to cope with it? Please. Thank you very much. And to an extent, there's nothing wrong with that. We do need to come to the point of accepting God's will and God's decisions and God's outcomes. But that's not where we are yet. That's not where we are in this series that we're going through. We find ourselves in lament, a theme which impacts upon nearly a third of all the Psalms. And in these Psalms, we're given a picture, an idea, a framework for how to be not okay. Or perhaps, more importantly, we're given permission. Permission to shout and scream. Permission to be angry and upset. Permission to throw every question in the book at God in utter disbelief. But I think in order to understand these Psalms, I think it's helpful to rethink our language on it. I think possibly we shouldn't talk about lament. And there's an important reason for this. One of the best scholars on the Psalms, a man called Goldingay, says this: lament suggests an acceptance of victim status. Protests do not accept. Protests are addressed to someone. They are designed to get a person with power to use their power to change a situation. You see, these aren't the words of people who've accepted their lot in life. They are protest and they cry out for change. Angie earlier in the week mentioned the idea of protesters with their placards. And I think that's something of what we see in these Psalms, almost that. What do we want? Change. And when do we want it? Right now. Listen again to some of those words we heard read earlier. Have mercy on me, Lord. Turn, Lord, and deliver me. Answer me when I call to you. Give me relief from my distress. Awake, Lord, why do you sleep? Rouse yourself, do not reject us forever. Rise up and heal us. Turn to me, be gracious to me. Relieve the troubles of my heart and free me from my anguish. In these Psalms, we're given permission to not accept everything, but to question. And partly that's why we had the reading as that kind of chaotic jumble of all those voices, because I think life is messy quite often and life feels like a jumble. And God says, that's okay. Bring that to me. I don't know about you, but since lockdown, I'm constantly bombarded by things on Facebook and Instagram talking about the coronavirus and Christians' responses to it. And it seems to me that most Christians are posting things along the lines of having hope in the face of COVID or a different perspective on the COVID crisis. And I get it. I understand the desire to lift our eyes beyond all this, to see the light that can come, but it leaves me, honestly, a little uncomfortable. And I think this is why. This is not okay. None of it. There may be hope to come. There may be spring to follow the winter. There may be shoots of life coming up amongst the mess. But at what cost? How many more need to grieve and mourn? How many more need to die? Because this coronavirus, despite what some say, is not sent by God. Of that I'm fairly sure. So please, don't listen to anyone who tells you differently. God is not in this. It is not of him. Yes, he is awesome, he can, and he will bring good from it. He is sovereign and powerful. But it is not from him. Does he have power to stop it now? Yes. Has he? No. Why? Well, if I knew the answer to that, this would be a very different sermon. But the whole thing raises questions, doesn't it? Ones that we want answers to, questions that are deeply unsettling. But what it's made me realise is how sheltered I have been to the suffering in the world. As I wrote this, there had been over 170,000 deaths worldwide from COVID. And many of us know people and love people who have died as a result. And 170,000 is a horrendous number. And this is heavy, it's not the only horrendous number. It's estimated 1.2 million people die every year from TB. Over 1 million die from HIV/AIDS. And it's estimated that around 9 million people die every year due to malnutrition. Yes, God can bring hope. Yes, God can bring freedom. I absolutely believe that. With every fibre of my being, I believe that. But right now, if I'm honest, and I think a lot of us, if we're honest, we're left with the question of Psalm 13. Those words we heard at the end of the reading earlier. How long, Lord? Will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? We all have doubts, and all of us have this or that aspect of faith which we find most challenging. For me, as I think it is with a number of people, the challenge is all of this. Pain and suffering. how they can exist when we believe in an all-loving, all-powerful God. If he doesn't want us to suffer, and he has the ability to stop it, why doesn't he? Why? How long, Lord? How long? Change it, God. That's the prayer, isn't it? Just change it, please. Have mercy, Lord. Answer me when I call to you. Wake, Lord, why do you sleep? Rouse yourself, why do you reject us forever? Rise up and help us. And it's okay to say these things. It's okay to be angry, to be discontent. It's okay to doubt. God is big enough. He can take all of it. He asks us to bring our pain and our questions to him. And we have a Saviour who is fully God, fully man, who did the same. In the Garden of Gethsemane, about to face his death, he cries out, "Father, if it is possible, take this cup from me." And he says that while literally sweating blood. The anguish and the pain was real for Jesus. And we also read that Jesus wept at the tomb of his friend Lazarus. He wept for his dead friend, knowing he was about to bring him back to life. And he wept. Why? Because it hurts. It hurts. As Pete Greig says in his phenomenal book, God on Mute, in this heart-rending request, we are assured that it's okay to grieve and cry, to plead with God and to wonder why. In fact, it's more than okay. It's affirmed as something that expresses his heart. God accepts our honesty. We rail, we lament, we protest because God invites us to. There is hope on the horizon out there. Somewhere there's hope. And Angie next week will be speaking into that more. Speaking into that idea of how we lament with the hope of the future. But I want to invite you. I want to encourage you this morning, wherever you are, wherever you're tuning in from. Why don't we be a little bit less polite British about the whole thing? Why don't we be a little bit less polite? Again, Pete Greig says this. Where are the moments in both our private and public meetings with God when the major key turns to the minor? When the soft rock anthems pay respect to the blues? And when those top melodies of pop praise finally give way to the scattered logic of jazz? In the Old Testament, when things went wrong, people tore their clothes, they wore horrible, itchy sackcloth, and they covered their heads with ashes, all as signs of mourning and of pain and lament. What do we do? How often do we hear ourselves saying, "Chin up, it'll be okay, I'm praying for you"? I think we need to go deeper. Let's cry out to God. Cry out at God. With coronavirus, with malnutrition and death, with the constant oppression of the most poor and needy, with abuse, trafficking, corruption, loneliness, and so many other things. Let us ask, how long, Lord? How long? Rise up and fix it. Act and change, because this isn't okay. And we're not happy about it. We don't want to accept it. We won't accept it. We will weep with those who weep. Mourn with those who mourn, knowing that God cares deeply. My principal at college, Michael Lloyd, always used to say, We know that death offends God because he died to get rid of death. Death, suffering, pain, they all offend God deeply. He is wounded and mourning over our suffering. So let's intercede. Let's bring our own pain, our own cries to God, and let's bring the pain and suffering of those in the world to him now. Let's protest now to God to change the world.